So the story should be like this very terrible thing that, I lost my wife, didn't lose my family because I still had my daughter who was firmly in my corner. But I was a little bit lost because now I'm in my 50s, and now how do I do this? Now do I play
What's
the
next?
straight game? Do I, so I tried doing some of those like, single things where, again, I have to be the boy. But I know down the road that even if I found someone that I was interested in, I would have to go through I have something to tell you,
Right.
Yada, yada, this
to
whole thing,
Yeah.
which is really, not looking forward to it. But one of the things I did do was I joined a Unitarian Universalist congregation.
Yes. Very cool.
Yeah, it was for me at least. A place where I could be accepted for who I am.
Yeah.
And eventually, I met a woman at the church, a cisgender heterosexual woman, who was just really funny and cool to be with. And, basically we were girlfriends. We'd do things and go places. And at some point, it started feeling like more than just social friends. And it turns out that she was finishing up a marriage just as I was finishing up a marriage. And I said to her, would you, I have a guy that I think you should meet. And she was, because all this time it's been Julie and Barb. Who's this? And I said, Terry. She said, oh, really? I said, so we set up a time to meet, kind of thing. And I took her out on a date as Terry.
So you grew up as Terry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we went out, we had a great time, and things proceeded, slowly, but proceeded.
And she dealt with that revelation reasonably well.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, well, see, for her, she had always known Julie, and
she really liked Julie.
She liked Julie a lot, and I think she even started having feelings that she was wondering, well, what's this all about too, type of thing.
Well, she was honest enough
to
and open enough.
Right. So 8 years ago, we started going out together, and we got to a point where, I was very, very uncomfortable, worried about, because with my first wife, I had to make sure there was enough Terry time to balance any Julie time that I took.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of felt that same responsibility with Barb. And I got to a point where I realized that it really didn't matter to her who showed up to pick her up. So I would email her, okay, someone will pick you up at 8 o'clock tonight. So she never knew who was going to show up.
And it was someone safe, though.
Yeah, exactly.
One of two people. Really, one of one person.
It was really just me, And we went forward, and shortly thereafter, we moved in and started living together. We lived together for 3 years. We got married in 2011, and we'll be celebrating our 5th anniversary this August.
And are you legally Julie?
No.
Okay.
Now, wait. Exclamation point or some asterisk maybe.
Okay.
My license will tell you that I'm female. But Terry is on my license. The one thing my mother did that was the right thing was giving me a gender-friendly name.
Yeah.
So, that was a real positive. And I never even thought of it. I hated my name as a kid. But what's interesting is that I went, one of the trans events I went to, I used my credit card. And they get, you got your credit card and your female name? And I'm like...
You could have kept Terry. And
right.
It was Terry.
Yeah, but believe it or not, there are girls out there with Terry.
Yeah, I think I know.
There are. So,
but you didn't want to. You wanted it to be...
Well, the Julie part is important because, as a protection for my family and so forth.
Oh.
Remember, it is not out of the question for violence to be attempted against transgender people.
Yes.
And every time that I am out, whether it's leading a demonstration, making a speech,
anything
realistically, anything can happen.
Yeah, that's too bad.
And we're,
So I do want to get to the issues.
Sure.
But I do want to ask one more thing, and again, I don't want to, I don't want to overstep, and so
right.
if I do, where are you at in terms of, I don't even know how to put this, just physical change?
Okay.
Reassignment and
all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, we of course had an agreement that you could ask me anything that you want. And people out there should understand that that's the agreement that we had. And I'm very comfortable with that. I mean, that's something that I agreed to.
I want to be respectful of
Exactly.
you.
But I want everyone to understand that when dealing with transgender people in public, unless you would ask, if you met a man on the street, would you go up to him and say, did you get circumcised?
Right.
Or
so
to
maybe
a lady,
it's not an appropriate question.
It's not an appropriate question in a general public type of way. It's one thing if you're a transgender leader and you're going to be interviewed and you're doing this because of the fact it's important for people to learn and understand.
Yeah, and if you know what, if you're a doctor or someone who's here to talk about men's reproductive health,
yes,
it might be an appropriate question.
Right.
So again, I guess I don't need. I was going to apologize, but I
no,
guess
you don't
I
need to. No, because we're totally cool with
this
it.
Is kind of the topic.
But
In general,
it is not a question. We had
don't do that.
Yeah. I had an interview.
Do as I say, not as I say.
An interview, which they were like, we can't, we just can't wait to ask the question. The answer to get to specifics is that other than electrolysis, I've done nothing else to my body, and there's a number of reasons why. First of all, as a male who was responsible for his family to take care of, paying for a house, putting my child through college and so forth, it was imperative under the working conditions that are there right now in this cisgender world that I remain male in order to have the job that I had, to be able to pay for a house, to be able to supply and give my family the things that they required. That's number one.
The way you interact with society.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
That's interesting.
Exactly. So that's number one. So you take care of your family first. The second thing is that these changes that people say, oh, are you on hormones? Did you have surgery? This is serious stuff. When you, let's just take hormones, for example. You can have severe blood clotting. I had a dear friend last year who was on hormones, die from a blood clot, just dropped dead.
So it can get it can complicate your health.
It can complicate your health. Now there are things that may be okay and may not be okay, and there are people that are more at risk than not at risk. But you are at risk when you're changing your body chemistry. It's as simple as that. To go for the physical changes, you're talking about surgery.
Pretty major surgery.
Very major surgery. And understand that medical providers won't cover it. Your insurance doesn't cover it. Now, there are changes going on, like Medicaid has been, some of the things that are happening in New York State are changing.
Society is creepingly.
Yeah. But like right now, I can't go to Empire Blue and say, oh, by the way,
I want this surgery.
I want this surgery. There's, you can have it, but you're going to pay for it. And you're talking about literally tens of thousands of dollars.
A lot of us have that problem. Not that exact problem, but a lot of us have problem with the medical insurance.
Sure, exactly. So when you add up all these things, let's add one more thing. As I've been very clear, I'm married a cisgender heterosexual woman. I want to have a relationship with that woman. When you take hormones, you are basically chemically castrating yourself. Now, supposedly, if you deal with perfect doses, perhaps that will, that won't, kind of thing. But you have to understand that hormones have a long-term effect on your ability. So,
and your desire.
And your desire, exactly. So I'm on that rope where I have no interest in surgery, but I personally would have loved to have had the ability to take hormones. However, the other factors have made it clear to me that it's just
risk
something
benefit
right
thing where you got, but that's very eyes open kind of a thing.
And at my point, I'm closing in on being a senior.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Exactly. The question is, if your body is functioning right now, why do you want to do anything that might make it stop functioning?
As we get older,
so
if it ain't broke.
Right. So if I would have done them earlier in my life when I was in my 20s and 30s, I wouldn't have had the career that I had, which was important.
Okay, so one other thing before we get to the issues,
Sure.
which is kind of really why you're here. My perception of the word transgender, I misunderstood that to mean surgical changes or hormonal changes. it is really a matter of self-perception of the person that we're talking about, you in this case, how you perceive yourself, and that you perceive yourself as a woman. Tell me, correct me.
Well,
The word
first of all,
transgender.
let's start with the word transgender. The word transgender is an umbrella term.
Okay.
It covers anyone, whether it's transsexual, whether it's, shall we use the term, cross-dresser, and anything in between.
I see a wide range of identities and experiences outside gender expectations.
Right.
And includes a bunch of other terms.
Sure, exactly.
Okay.
Right. So that is what we call transgender. Okay. I am absolutely positively transgender.
Thank you for
So that's clear.
clarification.
But if you ask me, well, what is your gender? My answer to you will be, I am a trans woman. And people get confused on that terminology. When you hear trans woman, it means that I started out biologically as a male, but my gender identity is female. And I'm letting you know that I'm transgender. Now, there are some transgender people who will say to you directly, I am not a trans woman. I am a woman through and through. I had to have an operation, or I'm trying to get an operation, but I am a woman. I am not trans anything. I am a woman. And I respect that. For me, my socialization, my experiences, my successes have male-based, are male-based. And for me to say that, I'm all woman, I've never felt all woman. How can you be captain of a football team and be all woman? It just doesn't work. However, there has always been a lot of Julie in the things that Terry did. And there's a lot of Terry in the things that Julie does.
Things aren't as simple as...
No, exactly. I mean, I can remember, I used to have to negotiate contracts with unions. And I would sit at a table with all the management, right? Mostly all male. And they would miss... I'd be sitting across the table and I just would watch people's, the way they looked or the way they moved after something was said or whatever. They'd be clueless as to what was going on. Yeah. The union would then leave and we'd have this little discussion and I'd say, they'd be like, da, 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 and I'd like, no, I don't think so. Here's what I think they're going to do. The union would come back in and would do exactly what I'd say. And then they'd look at me like, oh, how'd you know? And then there'd be a little more discussion. They'd leave the room. Body language. Because I'm always watching. I'm always looking. I'm always... Yeah, and but learning. Yeah. I do the same thing, with women to make sure that I look, how I want to look as best I can look, as close as I can look to a woman.
Body language really is language.
Oh, yeah.
And also, it occurred to me while you're talking about this, the way we refer to people is however they want.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
The way I would refer to you is, you tell me.
Right.
That's how I'll
And that's the appropriate, and that's beautiful. That's the appropriate way to do things. But I would not say that I'm a typical transgender person because the word typical does not fit.
Well,
no, exactly.
There is no. So let's talk about what some of the issues are and what some of the perceptions are that need to change, and how what you are doing as an activist and what LITEC is doing. So let's talk about issues.
Okay. Well, let's talk about issues. Right here in Nassau County, there is not an explicit law that protects transgender people. When you take a look at the civil rights law that is currently in Nassau County, you will see, for example, that sexual orientation is a protected class in the civil rights law in Nassau County. You will also notice that there are 15 definitions in the law. Some things like legislature, they describe Nassau County, they describe, crazy things like that, right to the nth degree as far as the definition goes. They talk about marital status, they define marital status. The one word that they do not define is gender. So, the next problem is that Judy Jacobs has put together an amendment for the law.
Oh, really?
To just simply define gender, to include the phrase gender identity and gender expression. Laws
as protected.
As a protected class.
So one cannot be or would not then be able to be
fired from their job, kicked out of their home, or refused a public service because of your gender identity, or what I perceive as your gender identity.
Right.
and your
On the
expression.
basis of perceived gender
Yes,
identity.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So,
Are there such laws elsewhere? There
yes.
must in New York City, I would suspect.
New York City has Suffolk County has a version
Really?
of it. Yeah, they have been since I think 2002. The city I think is 2002. Buffalo has it. Albany has it. Rochester has it.
So, I just wanted to interrupt because my perception is that a response, and I'm sure you've heard this response to people, and you really already undermined it, which is great, is that people's response might be, well, why does there need to be special protection? Yeah, aren't we all protected? And I guess the answer is no, because if you don't have specific protection, there can be the kind of discrimination that only you would understand.
Well, if you look at the protected classes, race, age, religion, national origin, so sexual orientation, these are all groups of people that have to be protected because the society as general has at one time or another discriminated against them. So what we're trying to do is take our community and protect it as if they were lesbians or gays, the same rights that they have. So,
and is this separate from? I guess it is. People's sexual orientation is protected.
Mhm.
The discrimination in Nassau County,
County,
discrimination against people because of their sexual orientation, who they love, is not allowed. It's
Exactly.
illegal.
It's illegal.
But gender, it is really allowed. Right
well,
now.
exactly. That's the key point. Specialists who deal with laws protecting transgender people constantly refer to the fact that we need to have the phrase gender identity and gender expression. So Judy Jacobs' amendment has that and a whole lot of others. I mean, it's a very strong and clear
Good for her.
definition of gender. That's all it's doing, defining gender.
And are we aiming at a target date that this is going to be voted on? What's going on with this?
Well, that's the problem.
Let's talk about it.
I believe that she has had this amendment
Oh,
that she's brought up to the Nassau County Legislature for 5 years.
really?
And the Republican-led legislature refuses to allow that amendment to come up for a vote. They say, quote unquote, you're protected. You don't need it.
Right, exactly. Why is it needed? It's not needed.
Exactly.
But the fact is it. So
Exactly.
let's talk about why it is needed. Let's talk about, if you like.
Well, I'd like to do one last thing before we do that, and then let's do that.
Sure.
So you say, well, what about the state? Now, New York State is a very liberal, very blue state. Come on, what's the deal there? Well, guess what? In 2002, the New York State Assembly and Senate passed a bill, became a law, called the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act, better known as SONDA, S-O-N-D-A, Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. Instead of putting language in that would protect the transgender people, they refused to put it in the bill because they were afraid that the bill wouldn't pass. So currently in New York State, sexual orientation is a protected class in New York State. Guess what? Transgender people since 2003 have been fighting to pass what's called the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, or GENDA, G-E-N-D-A. And guess what? The Assembly has passed the bill for 9 straight years. Governor Cuomo has already said he supports the bill.
Yeah.
But the Senate has never brought the bill to the floor for a vote.
Any idea why? Other than,
well, one of the reasons
I can guess why.
Well, one of the reasons is, it's two things. I see it as either they're transphobic, okay, transphobic being phobia on trans people, okay, or they're politically motivated.
What would be politically motivating?
The Conservative Party has made it clear, especially after the vote for marriage equality, that a vote for gender would mean that the Republican senators will not be given the conservative line at an election.
Really?
Yeah.
And marriage equality, my understanding, is overwhelmingly supported by the citizens of the country.
Oh, absolutely. Overwhelmingly.
Not every one of them, but overwhelmingly supported.
Well, the problem is that I believe it was 3 Republicans that voted for it. All 3 Republicans are no longer in the Senate.
And that's why. That's the
part
threat that would be carried out.
That's the threat.
Okay, so let's
we have no
talk
state.
about...
We have no county, and guess what? We have no federal protection. Federal law, right now there's an act called the Equality Act, which would protect LGBT people, lesbians, gays, bisexuals,
Okay.
and transgender people
Okay.
from discrimination in housing, employment, and public services. Right now, although everybody thinks
There was
that
an armed service.
armed services just this month
Yes.
allow
I know.
transgender people to serve. And here's the sad thing right now that I'm still involved in looking up. There were a number of service men and women who were found out to be transgendered and eliminated from
Mustered out of the service.
mustered out of the services,
Really?
and they cannot get any veterans benefits. So now
That's terrible.
we have to see whether, I don't know whether that's changing
Whether
now with the new
Well, for
regulations.
those individuals, it might be too late.
Well,
We
if
hope
they're
not.
still alive, why wouldn't we? If our country was wrong, why wouldn't we protect those?
So
who
you know what?
fought for us?
Let me get to this. I would have closed with this, but we have other things to talk about. What can people do? Because that's very important. That's something. What do you suggest that people do in terms of, I guess, reaching out to their public servants, or what can they do to help this to change?
Well, on a local level, if we're talking about Nassau County, we need people to support Judy Jacobs' amendment.
How?
Simply, I would say by just letting her know that you're supporting her work and that you want her to continue the
What
fight.
about contacting members of the
Well, that's what I was-
legislature who represent us?
Absolutely.
And telling them that.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you that the Democratic Party, those who are in the Democratic Party that serve on the legislature, are very, very supportive. All of them, top to bottom. However, those who have Republican legislators, they need a little bit
What
of a
we
push.
need is some higher ups who are Republicans to have people in their families come out as transgender.
Yep.
Which probably has happened, but
Right.
and that's how you get things done.
So
So
that's-
happens in a
right.
senator's family, so, and that's when it changes.
So that's Nassau. From a state standpoint, we are trying to get Senator Flanagan, who told constituents before he was the Senate Majority Leader that he supported the gender bill if it came up for a vote.
But it's got to come.
But he was always protected because Dean
It never
Skelos was
would.
never going to bring that bill to the floor.
Right.
Now he has the power to bring that bill to the floor for a vote. Complete silence, which is one of the reasons why we dropped the demonstration on him 3 weeks ago at his district office. Because, he made that commitment, and now
And now, who would be Todd Kaminsky? Who would be the person to bring this to a vote?
well, the majority leader would. He has the ability to red light or green light bills onto
Flanagan.
the floor.
Flanagan, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Daniel Squadron is the senator who is the main bill carrier for Genda.
Okay.
So there's that. And on a bigger stage, we really want our congressional people to be aware of the Equality Act. Because if we could get the Equality Act, then all this other work is garbage. But
What
we
is the
literally have
Equality Act?
that is the federal bill that will protect LGBT people from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations.
And where is that at?
Just being introduced. I think it was introduced this past spring.
Okay.
So you can Google it, look it up, but it's the
Is
Equality
that also
Act.
going to be a Democrat-Republican thing where the two houses,
Oh, yeah, probably.
who's controlling the houses could be...
Well, the problem is that when you have political candidates like Cruz speaking out against transgender people and making them look as they're the evil people that are going to attack your daughter or wife in the bathrooms, these are things that we have to fight against.
Yeah, by the way, perverts are perverts because they're perverts, not
Right.
because they're any particular, It's like terrorists. They're terrorists because they're terrorists, not because they're this religion
Right.
or that religion.
Exactly.
So you have some really interesting information here about discrimination and
Yeah.
about, some actual truths. Can you tell us
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit about that?
Well, I think the thing that everybody needs to know is that in 2011, there was a national transgender discrimination survey put together to just find out what's going on with the community. The numbers are quite startling. If you're transgender, you are 4 times more likely to have an annual income of less than $10,000.
Wow.
4 times more likely than the average person.
And are these adults?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not your income's not low because you're 14.
No.
Okay. Wow.
41% of the respondents to this survey had attempted suicide.
My God.
78% admitted being harassed at work or at school. 35% were physically assaulted. 26% lost their job when they came out as being transgender. 16% were forced, they admitted, this is the amazing thing, 16% admitted to being forced to work in an underground economy. By the underground economy, we're talking about drugs and sex work. So because there's no other way, you can't get a job, you have no place to live, you're going to do whatever you can to survive, and admitted. Remember, there are people doing it who are probably not going to admit that they're doing it, but 16% admitted that they're doing it.
And there's a lot of stress.
Oh my God!
I think
oh God! The trauma. Almost 20% were refused a home or an apartment when they came out. 11% were evicted when they came out, and close to 20% were refused medical care. You know, you've always heard these horrible stories about a trans person lying in the street, and the emergency vehicle pulls up and then goes, "Oh, it's one of those people," and then doesn't really, and do not take care of it. But worse than that is these numbers, which are immensely high, are more than double for the Black community and the Hispanic community.
It's incredible.
It's just off the wall.
It's a hard life to have.
Exactly.
And it's an upward battle, I'm sure.
Exactly.
And from everything that I've heard, these bits of groundbreaking legislation, whether it's the Equality Bill or with Judy Jacobs,
right, the amendment,
would address at least some of these things. Not so much the social ones, I guess, and hopefully society is moving forward, and the assaults and the harassment is going to stop or get less and less. People can get counseling, but refusing a home or apartment to someone because of being transgender, evicting them, refusing them medical care, being forced to work in particular fields that are not such great places, that will be changed by this legislation. It will
start. I guess in 1964, LBJ rather, signed the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
Today, we're still having racial issues.
There are people who want to repeal it.
Well, that's a whole nother story. But so for all that time, we're still struggling in America here. So I don't believe that for one moment that legislation is going to just change everything. And that's one of the reasons why we do as much outreach as we try to do. One of the projects that we're working on right now is we were able to get a grant last year from the Long Island Community Foundation. And through the Long Island Unitarian Universalist Fund. We are currently going across the state and meeting with transgender communities across the state to find out what problems they're involved in, what their vision of life should be, and what action steps might be able to be taken right now.
So is that LITEC that's doing that?
Yeah, basically, yes. Wow. We've actually, what I've done is I've connected with a number of activists around the state.
Okay.
And we, do conference calls, I won't say every week, but almost every other week in planning. And we kicked off March 31st, we had our first in Brooklyn. From there, May, we ended up doing Buffalo, Rochester.
Wow.
Well, we've done Oneonta, Plattsburgh, and here on Long Island.
Plattsburgh's way up.
Yeah. I'm getting a real tour of the state, and how to get there.
Good.
But
good. And hopefully you'll keep keep the effort up.
Yeah. That's I think our biggest thing is from the information that we get, we'll hopefully be able to put together a legislative agenda that we will then be able to go forward with. One of the things that happened last year was, and this is Governor Cuomo, put regulations out instructing the courts that gender identity and gender expression discrimination should be treated under sex discrimination.
Okay.
So even without the law, he's instructed the courts that if you come across, gender discrimination, it should be put under sex discrimination.
And does that carry the weight of law?
Not as much.
But it's something.
It's a good half to three-quarter step to having the law that would just explicitly say do not discriminate against transgender people.
Right, and hopefully it creates some kind of momentum that will lead up to more and more protection for people who are transgender, and hopefully talking about these things,
Right.
you know, in a public forum, and we'll do everything we can to get this information out there, can help to erode some of that discrimination. So I just want to say you're always welcome here, and
Well, thank you.
if there are issues that are important for the public to hear about, that will be helpful to the transgender community, just give us a call and come on over.
Wonderful. We really appreciate it. I mean, this type of program is so helpful to us to get the word out and to make people aware of what the real situation is.
Excellent. Happy to do it.
Thank you so much.